Welcome to all our new listeners on Audioversity 106.2 FM, the voice of Reichman University. I'm Gal Rappaport, a researcher at the International Institute for Counterterrorism, and today we're honored to have with us Professor Moran Yarchi to the Institute's third episode of our official podcast called Unmasking the Threat to discuss social media, digital influence, and terrorism. Professor Moran Yarchi is the head of the Digital Influence and Perceptions Specialization at the Sami Ofer School for Communications, the head of the Public Diplomacy Honors Program, a senior fellow at the Abba Eban Institute for International Diplomacy, and a senior researcher at the International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University. Her main fields of research are political communications, public diplomacy, media coverage of conflicts and terrorism, and new media. Welcome, Professor Yarchi.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, Professor Yarchi, let's dive right into our conversation today. Today, we are witnessing the profound impact of social media and various aspects of our lives. From politics to personal connections and even the way businesses operate to social media, this digital revolution has also influenced the realm of terrorism, providing new tools for extremist groups to spread their message and recruit members. Can you start by explaining how terrorist organizations in general have adapted their communication and mobilization strategies with the increase of sophisticated and influence of social media?
Yeah, of course. Let me take one step back. Let's take a moment to understand how we got to where we are. When we are looking at our world in the last few decades, we can see that we had experienced various revolutions pretty much at the same time. So one of them, which is a little older, is the democratization revolution. A lot of states, mostly after World War II and then after the dissolvement of the USSR, had become democracies, and in democracies, people matter. We have abilities to influence politics, to influence our lives, and people are empowered. The second revolution is the technological revolution, started with satellite capabilities and then social media or smartphone, internet, smartphone, social media, again empowering individuals and other organizations. In international relations, we also saw how countries are not the most significant actor anymore. We have other actors, whether it's on the economical realm with big tech companies, whether it's in the realm of war and security with terror organization, but again, taking the power from countries to individuals to other organizations. And those changes had brought wonderful things to our lives, but they also brought some less good things to our lives. And our ability to express ourselves, to be open, is something that initially scholars were expecting to have mostly positive implications. When we were looking at social media, we thought it's going to be much more democratic, that everybody is going to get the same microphone and the ability to shout what they want. And we know that that's not the reality on the ground. But just like people and organizations are using those tools to promote positive things like social revolutions or diversity and other things that may seem more positive, terror organizations are taking the same ability, and a lot of them are internet savvy, and they know how to use the platforms and to take it to their advantage or use it to their advantage. And they're using the same capabilities to promote fear, to promote terror, and to spread fear around the world. So when we're looking at the activity of terror organizations in online platforms, and in recent years it's mostly on social media, we can see that they're doing everything that they used to do on the physical realm, but doing it faster in a more efficient way on social media. So if we're looking at their ability to recruit supporters, Uh, it used to take them months and years through education systems, in mosques and in other physical occasions. And now, using social media and using narrowcasting, identifying the individuals that are most influenced and targeting them specifically, we can see that this whole recruitment process can be narrowed down to weeks, something that used to take years. Same with fundraising. It's not that they didn't fundraise before. Now they're doing it in a more efficient way on social media, spreading fear, because when we're talking about terror organizations, some of it is targeting their own potential supporters, and some of it is actually spreading fear towards specific populations. So they can also do it in a very efficient way. And when we're looking at social media specifically, it's an amazing tool for them because they can promote the message that they see fit in an uncensored, unfiltered way. They have some control over the message. If they make it newsworthy or interesting enough, it usually becomes viral. And they're very efficient in the way that they're conducting themselves on social media.
It's clear that the traditional barriers to spreading propaganda have been significantly lowered. Now focusing on Hamas specifically, can you detail some of the tactics in forming their narrative that they use on social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Telegram to further their cause?
Yeah, when we're looking at the way Hamas is communicating its messages, it's interesting to see that they're communicating to various target audiences. And I think that we can take October 7th and days following the October 7th massacre as an example to how Hamas is conducting itself. So in the beginning, and it's really important to note that Hamas took image considerations and media consideration and their ability to spread fear as a salient element in the October 7th massacre. The fact that so many of the terrorists were wearing body cams, it was part of their preparation. They knew that they would want to shoot what they're doing and that they would want to spread this message to the world. The fact that they used live broadcasting, like they actually shared some of the attacks live on different social media platforms. So we can see that in the initial stages, it was mostly terror. It was mostly spreading fear on one hand, but also pushing the buttons of people that may identify with them and trying to recruit support. And that's something that we also saw in the days following the attack, that Hamas uses social media in order to turn to other organizations and call them to join them. Call them to say, we were so successful, come join us, let's fight Israelis, let's fight the Zionist entity. So that was what they did initially. But a few days after that, we started seeing that they changed their strategy in a very extent way. They were actually deleting many of the atrocity videos. And they went back to a strategy which is very familiar when you're looking at Hamas's usual posting, and they were focusing on the suffering of the Palestinian people. They went back to the role of victim, understanding that those atrocities won't garner international support, and in that point of time, they needed that international support. Now, since October 7th, we see that Hamas is actually playing with different strategies at different time frames. Mostly, or the most obvious ones are in the hostages videos that they are releasing. And even with those videos, we see different strategies. Some of them, at least in the beginning, were a wake-up call to the Israeli society. those are your people. You need to do something about that. Then it was, I think all of those videos are a form of the theater of terror. They're creating a scene, and with social media, they're not only have control over the attack, the timing, the location, the victims, they also have control over the message. They're not just creating the attack or the event, they're creating the media coverage of the event. And with the hostages videos, it's very salient. So another type of videos was showing Israeli hostages, but then putting a question mark about their destiny and saying in 24 hours we will share with you their destiny. And then usually come back and say either some of them were killed or all of them were killed, or showing us bodies or things like that. If in the initial videos it was mostly claims for the Israeli people and the Israeli government to do something about it, then we saw that it was terror in a more extent way, because they were talking about the survivor or chances of those hostages. Then during Pesach, more or less, and when the negotiations were in a more had a more salient role in the conflict, we saw a different type of videos. Both Hirsch's video and Keith Segal and Omri Miran videos were very different than videos we saw before. They were a bit longer. They had a chance to present themselves in a certain way. They did call upon the Israeli society and the government to do something, but those videos had more content, more representation of the hostages themselves. And then we saw that they're going back to the more horrifying videos. So I think that Hamas uses those videos in a very sophisticated way. And they're using social media in a very sophisticated way. They're communicating with Israelis in a certain way. They're communicating to the international audiences in a different way. They're communicating to their potential supporters in a third manner. So we see that they're using it in a very sophisticated way. And also across the sphere, they're using different platforms in different ways.
Would you say that the protest on U.S. campuses is a part of their strategy?
I can't really say. I think that they're very happy about it, although there's an inherent contradiction between Hamas's strategies and goals and those of liberal progressive students in the United States. I'm sure that there are different organizations that are promoting those protests in a very salient way. I'm not sure if Hamas is behind it.
Interesting. So it's very evident that their approach was very calculated and multi-layered. Given their strategic use of social media, how effective do you believe that their digital campaign was in achieving their goals, both in the short term and in the long term?
So I think that it depends on the specific strategy. In the beginning, I think that they weren't so successful in mobilizing other organizations to join them in their cause. You can say Hezbollah had joined them to some extent, but not in the full-scale war that they were expecting. And on the West Bank, luckily, different organizations haven't joined their cause, So in the initial, at least in the initial goals, they weren't so successful. I think that they are successful in mobilizing international support, mostly because they're not focusing on Hamas. They're focusing on the suffering of the Palestinian people. That is something that we know with the narrative of compassion.
Ironic.
Yeah, but on one hand, but since I think that nobody can stay blunt to when you're watching kids suffering or starving or bodies or whatever, and those are the pictures that most people on the West see in Israel. They're not so salient. So I think that using the victimization of their own people is a tool that is very effective for them, and also terrorizing us is a tool that works to some extent. Um, I think that nobody can ignore the hostages' videos, and it pushes our buttons. So for some of us, it pushes our buttons and saying that we need to make a deal no matter what the cost is, because those are our people and we need to bring them back as soon as possible. For other people, it pushes their buttons and say, we need to act more aggressively militarily to bring back the hostages. But we all understand it pushes our buttons, and we all understand that something needs to be done. So it means that they are successful to some extent.
It's truly concerning how effective these campaigns can be, especially in how successful they are in entering the walls of government offices. Which brings me to the countermeasures of our discussion today. What steps can government and organization take to counteract these sophisticated digital campaigns?
First and foremost, I think that there is a growing understanding, but it needs to be more salient, that there is an image war going on. There is a fight over legitimacy. And it's no longer just a military campaign. And image consideration and legitimacy considerations should be a central element of the war strategy. And we need to understand the positions of the international arena and the way they perceive the war, and to make sure that militarily we're doing what needs to be done, but in a way that we won't pay the price of legitimacy, that we can still be able to achieve our goals. I think that with at The Hague in recent months, starting with the International Court of Justice that talks about genocide and whether or not Israel is committing a genocide. And in recent days in ICC, the criminal court, which actually targets individuals and accuses them of war crimes, we can see how important the legitimacy aspect is. And I have a feeling that what's going to prevent us from achieving our goals is actually the legitimacy element or the image element, and less the way we conduct ourselves on the ground. So I think that image considerations should be more salient in the way we are conducting ourselves. And also I think that is something that us as the public needs to be more involved in. There's, to some extent, the ability of countries to promote their messages is limited in our reality. But I think when people are hearing people's stories or receiving the civic element of the reality, is something that people can identify with in a more salient way. And in that manner, I think that the government is doing sometimes a better job, sometimes not doing enough, and we have the IDF that is also working in those realms. But we saw and are seeing a lot of civic initiatives out there. So following October 7th, people like me that have been studying this realm for many years had felt that every second person in Israel had an initiative to promote Israel on online platforms. Since it was mostly volunteer-based initiatives, many of them had dissolved over time. And now we see the older ones that are still operating, whether it's Stand With Us and Israelis and Aktayel here on campus at Reichman University. And there are some new ones that are also salient in that perspective. But I think that we have a role here. And our role as individuals is, on one hand, to maybe to share our story or to take part if you feel comfortable with that. But also in terms of countering terrorism, the platforms are officially in their policy claim that they are fighting terrorism, and they're trying to do to some extent. And when we're talking about governmental initiative to fight it. So it's usually legal issues that take too long. But if we as citizens from all over the world see terrorists' activities on online platforms and we would report about it together, our ability to take down those posts, no matter on which platform, is much greater, because if a lot of people report on a post at the same time, and that's actually a lot of the things that Actayel has been doing, pushing for online activism, when we report on the same post at the same time, usually in a couple of hours, it's not there anymore. And that's part of our ability, which is sometimes greater on those platforms than the ability of governments.
Mm-hmm. And what role can social media companies play in this fight?
Yeah, so I think that they are trying. I think that they're not doing enough. Some of them are more, they are doing it in a more prominent way. I think for a long time, Twitter or X was deleting accounts, but it's counterproductive to some extent. In the summer of 2014, when ISIS came to our life in a very salient way with a lot of beheadings, there was a few months that every day Twitter would delete terrorist-related accounts, and the next day they would reappear. So it's kind of counterproductive, because when we're talking about individuals, they can do whatever they want, whether they're part of a terror organization or not. So some of them have been fighting, and I think that they can do more with censoring harmful content. But again, I think that if we as citizens would be more active, that would be more efficient. Some platforms are not even trying to fight it.
Or are doing the opposite.
Yeah. TikTok, for instance, is more problematic because it's visual based, and also their policies are not as obvious, and they're not doing enough to promote a peaceful environment for the younger, more or less immune audiences that are the audience of TikTok. So I think we can demand that the platforms would do more, but I think that we cannot leave it only at the hands of platforms. If we'll take it in a broader way and won't talk only about terrorism and the way that we think that the platforms should fight terrorism, as a political communication scholar, I'm really worried about the notion of censorship on social media platforms. So it's obvious to me that when it's violent, it needs to be taken off, or when it's inciting or anything like that. But I keep asking myself about the interaction between freedom of speech and this violent content. And I'm troubled by the fact that we're leaving those decisions to the platforms. TikTok, for instance, we heard a lot of voices against TikTok that they're fighting pro-Israeli messages and promoting pro-Palestinian messages and even Hamas messages in an extent way. And that's something we found very troubling. But we can see it in various arenas as well. We felt it because it touched, it pushes our buttons. So as Israelis, we thought that it's something that shouldn't be conducted the way it was. But why should we leave the decision about which content is appropriate and which not to the platforms? I don't even think that the politicians should be the ones deciding what's okay and what's not okay in online conversations. And I'm really troubled by the fact that if we will allow more censorship, it will be used for political purposes. And that's something that I found really troubling.
Do you think it should be left to the citizens? Because it's also a little troubling with all the opinions in the United States, all the chants from the river to the sea, thinking that it's okay, but in other words, they could be another way chanting a genocide.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, and we're looking at it from a very Israeli perspective. But even if we look at it from an international perspective or an internal U.S. perspective, if the people that are making those decisions are more liberal or, on the other hand, more conservative, that would have an effect on the messages that are being promoted on social media, and that's something that is super troubling. We don't want to live in a world in which somebody determines what's okay to say and what's not. And you ask a fair question: should it be the public? I don't have a clear answer, but I know that it shouldn't be the platforms by themselves. It shouldn't be politicians by themselves. I do want some uh, public involvement, maybe of professionals that would be a part of this decision-making process. And I don't have a clear answer. I'm just raising a red flag, saying that's something that we need to think about.
Balancing these concerns is definitely challenging but necessary. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the future. With technology advancing rapidly, such as generative artificial intelligence and its ability to easily and freely generate disinformation and misinformation, how do you see the tactics of terrorism evolving in the digital age?
I'm really troubled by it, and we do see some of it occurring right now and in recent years, both with fake news and misinformation and disinformation that is being spreaded. And AI is definitely a part of it. I think that if we're talking about the narrative of compassion and the ability to push Western society's buttons and to try to mobilize them to support one of the sides uh, through images of suffering and mostly children, and knowing that AI can create those images in seconds, you don't really know what to trust anymore. But we know that those visual images, as long as they're looking authentic, they have the same impact as real videos and pictures coming out from war zones. And we need to understand when it's a visual image, the cognitive impact on us as viewers is much greater. So that is something that I find really, really troubling. But more than that, when we look at foreign interventions in different political systems, we know that there are powers that are working to polarize societies. And I think that that's the direction we are heading, and that is something that, again, as a political communication scholar, I found really, really troubling. They don't even need to support one of the sides. All they are trying to do is to widen the gap and create a hostile environment within our society. And in the current polarized reality, both in Israel, in the US, and in other places around the world, that's not such a difficult task to do. But if they're pushing the buttons of the different sides and making them fight with one another, they're achieving their goals, because their goal is to create chaos. Their goal is to create polarization and to make us fight with one another. And I think that that is something that is troubling, and we need to find better ways to counter those online attacks.
Let's hope the blue teams hurry up to bypass the exploitations of terrorists in using these technologies. Professor Yahi, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us today. This has been an incredibly enlightening conversation.
I had a great time speaking to you, and hopefully the good team will win.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to Unmasking the Threat. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and join us next time as we continue to explore the rapidly evolving and complex era of digital warfare.